Welcome to today's webinar, where we're going to be talking about harnessing the power of video to enhance your candidate experience. And I'm delighted today to be joined by our expert panel. We have Noel Thomas, co-founder and creative director at CA3, Charu Malhotra, a global talent and attraction leader and an expert in designing inclusive people experiences, and Chris LeCand-Harwood, founder and content strategy lead at Content Marketing Pod. So to start, just to set a bit of background, we'll start with some insights from the 2024 UK Candidate Attraction Report, which we at Eploy conduct annually with HR Grapevine magazine. Now, this survey polls around 800 in-house recruitment teams across all sectors and company sizes in the UK. And one of the key focus areas is the types of content found on company career sites. Interestingly, around 43% of companies are currently using video, mostly in the form of employee stories. Yet video is often seen as time-consuming and costly. So does this mean that only large companies with big budgets can use it? So let's take a closer look at how video usage breaks down by company size. Now, this chart shows in dark green those companies that are currently using video now as part of their candidate attraction. In light green, those that are planning to use video, and in red, those that are not planning to use. So what the chart shows that only around 17% of SMEs, so those with fewer than 250 employees, currently use video, though 36% plan to. In the mid-market, about a quarter use video, while over half of enterprise companies already do, with the majority of the rest planning to implement it. But what about its impact? Is video truly effective in attracting high-quality candidates? Well, we also ask companies to rank their career site by the quality and quantity of candidates that they attract. And on average, as you can see, the results are fairly balanced in terms of candidate quality and quantity. However, when we examine the best performing career sites, so those that are attracting a high number of suitable candidates, there's a clear trend towards candidate-centric content, of which employee videos in this example is one. So for example, top performing sites are 6 times more likely to be using video. Of course, attracting candidates is just one piece of the puzzle. And with 31% of talent acquisition teams surveyed reporting that they actually have a reduced recruitment marketing budget in 2024, how can we leverage video cost effectively to enhance the entire candidate experience? So to explore this further, I'm now going to hand over to Noel. Noel, good morning.
Good morning, Bruce, and thanks for having us here today. So really interesting to see those statistics, even though I guess one of the focuses of the information you've got there is careers websites. And I think what we're going to try and hopefully do today is explore video in its wider uses and the lots of different places that you might be able to leverage that to support your talent attraction and your employer brand and awareness. I guess where I want to start though is looking at those stats and looking at the wider market. Why is video so important these days? You know, why even if organizations aren't thinking about using it, why should they be doing it? And Chris, I don't know if you've got any thoughts. Why is video such a useful and flexible medium?
Yeah, this is such a juicy topic. I think, and really enjoyed chat with you guys beforehand, prepping for this, last week. But I think simply the world is consuming video daily, weekly, monthly. You're looking at YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Netflix. They are all built around video, and they are investing in video production. Just to take, for example, like YouTube. That's just one of the many examples. Is there's 1 billion hours of video consumed on YouTube every single day, and that's not just young people doing it. I think that the ship sailed a long time ago that actually social media behavior and digital behavior online is just for younger generations. I think it is definitely cross-generational, and actually example of that is where You've got We Are Social. They're a consumer B2C agency that do an annual report, and their global digital report said that watching video was the third biggest priority for them in terms of what they do on the internet, and that was like anything between 52 and 58% of people having it as number 3. But then they had other things like learning, just consuming information, which video will clearly be part of that as well. So I think my view is literally the world is consuming video, regularly, but there's just a challenge where employers are not reflecting that consumption because of various barriers, and that we'll be talking about today.
And I was going to say, Charu, coming from your side, from the employer side, what are some of those barriers, do you think, from a top level perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think just want to kind of observe, somebody made a point in the chat, which is absolutely valid, around different learning styles. So, video is such a valuable and important channel and way of consuming information, as Chris just quite rightly said, and those stats are quite mind-blowing. I often think that YouTube is sort of really underserved as a channel when we come to communications by most organizations, but spot on whoever KJ is in terms of it. We're not saying video is the only way that you'd want to create content. It's one of many ways, but it's a really valid one. And I think, making sure that things are accessible, closed captions, making sure that, it's not just the only way that you're sharing the insight about the job and so on is key. But I think the barriers are many, but in my experience of working both in large global corporates and smaller SME, small, medium-sized organizations, there's an element of cost. There's an expectation that if you're going to do a video and it sits, to Bruce's point, on a career site, it has to be a sort of a theatrical, glossy, very, very expensive or looking expensive type video, because it has to go through so many layers of approvals, legal, corporate comms, PR, and then of course everyone involved, at a leadership level. So I think there's both a cost element that people get nervous of, and then also the times and effort it takes to create those. And what we're going to talk about hopefully today are around the different employee moments. We don't need to lean into those sort of big corporate videos. They do have a place, I believe, but certainly the cost has gone down. But I think the real balance on employee-led and creating content is one where I think the magic is really happening and has been happening for the last 8 or 9 years. That was a really long answer to your question. I hope that's okay.
No, it was brilliant, because you didn't cover everything we meant to be covering later, which I think is perfect. I think for me as well, I think what I love about video is it's actually very, very flexible, both in terms of the stories it's telling, its focus, but also how it can be produced. And again, without going into too much detail what we're covering later, it doesn't have to be that expectedly big budget thing. There's lots of brilliantly creative ways to create fantastic footage which really tells your story or tells an employee's story. And I think it's hard to accomplish that in the same way with many of the mediums, and certainly from a platform perspective, even though I know podcasts are growing and growing in terms of audiences, video is still very much the king. I think and you only need to look at the rise of TikTok and the copying of the other main players in order to try and tag onto what they're doing to see just how important video is to your talent attraction, I think.
And actually, just to add to that, Noel, I think that goes back to the thing about there are high value companies that are investing in video, like Meta, like TikTok, and Netflix and Amazon, etc. Where actually, ByteDance, who owns TikTok, are doing it, where actually they wouldn't be putting their money into video unless the people that they wanted to have as users, who are ultimately helping them generate revenue, they wouldn't be doing it. So kind of follow the money, really, I think. And it's good to look at what organizations are doing. If video wasn't important, then they wouldn't be following the money. And I think it's interesting, actually, the stats you shared earlier on, Bruce, about the number of smaller companies who are showing that their investment in video is probably maybe a bit further away. It's because of there's that assumption that video is expensive. So it'd be good to chat about it, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned TikTok, it's got the highest engagement rate of any of the social channels, and again, it's video. So I think the stats I've got, it's like 18% engagement rate with every post, whereas Instagram's 3.86%. I mean, that is a massive, massive, massive difference, there in terms of someone paying attention to what content they're looking at. And the platform performs just so well because of that. Right. There's so many different ways to create a video. Today we thought where we could start though is talking about splitting the videos into two fields, and we're there's quite I'm oversimplifying it, shall I say, in splitting into these, but I think we're going to look at sort of employee generated videos and brand-led videos, and really discuss why it is important to have both. So for the purposes of our chat today, and as I say, we're oversimplifying, when we're talking about employee generated content, we're talking about your employees being advocates of your business, potentially and more likely filming the videos on their mobile phone or their laptop, so production value is low, but it's still very authentic and very real. And then next to that, we've got a more brand-led approach, which is, inherently the business talking about why a prospective employee should work here. And again, that's more likely professionally shot. And people are more likely to talk about, your EVP or an employer brand and how that's shining through. Coming back to you again, Chris, why is it important to have both though? And almost a personal question, which is your favorite?
I think it does need to be both. I think there is that love employee generated video because of the fact the quality has increased a lot more. I mean, we had Apple do their launch event last night, the iPhone 16, I mean, the capabilities within that phone is just amazing. And actually the iPhone and also other phones, has been high quality for a number of years now. So I love it kind of democratizes the creating of content, actually enables, employees to be able to share their thoughts. And I think in particular, it's really powerful in terms of, being able to share their opinions about things. And we're creeping into the world of personal branding here, but actually not just talking about how, an organization is a great place to work and this is what I do here, but actually the opinion as professionals, I think, is really important. So I do like that kind of democratization of the technology because of the rise of iPhones and the technology within them. But I do obviously also like more brand-led, video content. I think it does give an opportunity for I suppose curating, and particularly curating those stories from employees and also those opinions as well. And I think actually there is a blend between the two where you need to be able to call upon those employee generated videos and actually bring them into those brand-led videos, but even also using, and I think particularly this is an important thing, is using employee generated videos to test an idea, because it's relatively lower cost to produce those videos. So that's so before you go ahead and produce a brand-led video, you then actually test with employee generated video content and then double down on a particular areas that we know have had good engagement. So I do like both, definitely, and there is definitely a place for both. But I think for me, a key thing, whether it's employee generated or it's brand led, is that the first thing you've got to do, and it might be simplifying a bit, but I think it's nice to keep it simple, is don't create content for them, but for you, create content for them. It's very easy for us to want to go, right, what do we want to sell about us as an organization? But actually we need to think about really what do the people we want to put this content in front of, what do they want? And I think that goes beyond demographics, that goes into psychographics and needs and motivations, etc. But if we can give them content that actually adds value to their life instead of just, being a sales pitch, then I think that's like super important. And it's what You know, is what companies like Netflix and Amazon do, you know, and YouTube creators do, YouTubers do, where they're constantly creating content for the audience, and that's why they're successful.
I think that's a really good point. And Charu, coming from your side again, you know, you being client side, as we'd say, you know, I think the first time I wanted to met you, or certainly talk to you, was I think years back when you were at Ferrero, and you created a fantastic brand-led video there that I think won awards, but certainly got my attention. How do you balance that idea of what an organization wants to say about itself with I think a really good point about criticism, but you need to be talking to the individual about what they want, really.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the work that we're trying to do in this sort of employer branding space, and you know, this around candidate experience, is helping the TA teams and the recruiters engage the right individuals in that journey, in that process. And for me, that the balancing act is, you know, really, you know, the heavy lift should be, if we use the ATS, for example, every moment in that, you know, in that ATS process, there's a really solid opportunity to create a short, sharp video. Now, I'm not saying that that's what everyone should do, but I do, you know, massive believer on those don't need to be big branded videos. They absolutely shouldn't be. But actually, if you think about the amount of information and insight TA teams and colleagues on this call have around why candidates are saying no, or where the recruiter's having to spend an awful lot of time persuading the candidates, that's a really brilliant opportunity to create a hiring manager insight. You know, you might have thought that this is what consultants do, but actually, let me tell you a bit about my team and my background. You might have thought that actually all, you know, tech engineers work from home, but we've got, you know, a solid community in our office. Let me show you around the office and something we're doing, you know. And I feel like, you know, that those steps of employee created content, and there are, you know, absolutely lovely tools and resources that help create things that aren't really, really grainy, you know, like Blair Witch Project type videos. I'm showing my age here, but still something that's going to get past brand, that's going to get past your legal teams, but can be used on LinkedIn and on other social channels, perhaps not the career site, but on, you know, that I think that that's where the power is, and where the balance of big branded videos, they have a place, but I feel like they're on the journey of not just the careers pages, but all the pages, because ultimately your clients, your customers, the community you serve, and of course employees, which I think are becoming more and more important when it comes to kind of video, and this is where doubling down on your budget becomes really key, will actually find them useful. Because I know I've worked in massive companies and small companies and not known what the team beside me does. So actually video can really unlock that. And then the other point I just wanted to make was, it doesn't necessarily just need to be peer-to-peer. The Edelman Trust Index came out yesterday, this year's, which I definitely encourage anyone that sits in TA to have a look at that. And again, year in year, it's sort of actually leaders aren't as trusted. Your peers are trusted, but we don't want that to be the kind of the status quo. So actually having your leader, your managing director, leaders to be more accessible via video is really powerful, because again, to Chris's point, it's becoming much easier to create. Whereas if you do something that's got to have this grand production, that CEO is not going to give you the time. But actually, if it's your comms person and your head of employer brand, i.e. me, saying, let's do it like this, you know, it's not the Wild West, but it's a much more flexible way of working. And we can get this out every month in a wonderful newsletter and use it on LinkedIn. You know, happy days.
I think actually to add to that, Charu, it's I think, you know, we often talk about the competition being other organizations wanting to recruit talent, but actually there isn't just the competition for talent, it's the competition for attention. So actually there's a lot of user generated content being created out there, and actually your content is really going side by side in the feed, or top and bottom of the feed. You know, it's only a swipe away, you know, and actually the creator economy, as it's called, of people who actually are creating their own content, putting on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc. In the UK alone, it's generated over £2 billion pounds in the year. It's like 45,000 full-time equivalent staff. So if there's a new industry that's created, more traditional industry that's created, generating those many jobs or losing those many jobs, you'd hear about it in the news. So it's like, again, it goes back to the thing about follow the money. But in particular, it's your competition isn't just the other organizations wanting to attract that talent. It's life that is the competing thing of all these other pieces of content that needs to, and yours needs to stand out amongst it. And that's why employee generated content is important, because that's the kind of content that, other organizations doing different things, looking to when they're wanting to sell things or entertain people.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is it? Because I think we're all guilty of often thinking that we're just competing, as you said, against our talent competitors. But actually, unless someone is, a warm candidate, i.e., they're actively looking for a job, which is rare these days, then actually it's everything else you're competing against, really, isn't it? And if you're not pushing out content that someone can engage with and find interesting and learn from, or whatever you're getting from it, then you're going to be losing that battle ultimately, aren't you?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at, I've just pulled some stats down myself. There's a survey done by Wistia, which is a video marketing platform. Apparently 62% of the people they spoke to trust influencers over public figures at the moment, which I think is quite a shocking statistic, really, to be honest. But if they're engaging with these people on the platforms more often than they are with those public figures, I guess it's easy to understand.
But actually, I've done some work recently with an organisation that's very much focused on helping companies attract Gen Z talent into organisations, and they've got a big community of ambassadors that are about to have just entered the workforce, and big thing that came through was actually them using platforms like TikTok and like YouTube as a way of finding out things like information about financial advice, about health, about cooking. There's lots of research out there, and we'll be sharing some links at the end of this post this event, but it's about people actually using video and using YouTube, TikTok, etc., to actually learn things. And actually, again, if you can, as an organization, lean towards the learning piece and how can you help people learn, then it's absolutely fantastic to do that. And actually, YouTube is still, and it's been like this for years, still the second largest search engine on the planet after Google. So that says something in terms of actually people using it as a place to discover things.
Yeah, and I think it also suggests that the greater need these days to be working in unison with your sort of brand or marketing area of the business, so that the videos and content they're pushing out, is benefiting your talent attraction and vice versa, I guess, ultimately.
I'd add another area to that, though. I think brand and comms, absolutely spot on. But I feel like in the last couple of years, we in TA and employer branding need to be much more aware and cognizant of our L&D colleagues, because actually in a world where our talent teams budgets are becoming less, in most cases they're being squeezed, brand budgets are often again having an impact, whereas actually from an L&D perspective, CEO trends, any kind of LinkedIn insights talks about retention, internal mobility, the need for more engagement, higher productivity, especially in the UK. And therefore our L&D teams, our talent teams, who are often responsible for that learning journey, how do we keep people sharp? How do we keep people still on top of their skill sets? They've got budgets that we could be working in partnership with, going back to that, creating lovely content that's valuable internally about learning, about careers, about opportunities that candidates are really hungry and have an appetite for too. So I think the circle of brand and comms needs to include L&D much more systematically, certainly in 2024, 2025.
Absolutely, and I think we're going to touch on where you can leverage video content well in a moment. One question I've got, I think, I'm listening to this, I'm thinking about all this amazing employee generated content, but how do you manage this well? as an organization, particularly if I in a TA function, there's me and the company dog maybe running it. How do I build a stream of content, and get people to be sending me videos, or get my employees to start doing that? What's the best way to manage that, do you think?
First of all, I think it's strategy. It makes a strategy and structure, where actually, it's a danger in social media, seeing this over the years, is that kind of everything's thrown at social media as well. Oh, can you post that? Can you post that? Oh, let's do this. Let's jump into video now. What can we do? So I think having a very clear content strategy that works off an EVP, that is about our content needs to achieve this and do at least one of these things every time we post it or every time we produce it. So I think strategy, and obviously that also brings another thing about really thinking about the audience and what they want, and how your content can help them. Then that gives you that kind of editorial focus, which means actually then when it comes to requesting content, or actually content requests coming to you, there's a clear kind of tip box in terms of, okay, yeah, this is what we should be doing. And I think in terms of systems, I remember years ago doing it very manually, sending video links. We transfer links of videos from various employees, but the technology has come on a long way in terms of, platforms like CNET, the Martech. There are other platforms available, of course, where actually that will give people the ability to actually open up an app like CNET, for example, see the questions that they need to answer, use their phone, use their desktop to then answer those questions, and then submit it once they're happy, and then it goes up into a studio in the cloud where someone else can then go off and edit it. I think the last thing as well is actually eventually you want to have a team that can, or somebody that can take a chunk of the kind of production part off your hands if it's just you or a small team. So I think the important thing is to start small as well. So that's why employee generated content again is good, because actually there's ways of doing something first to then build the business case to do more investment and to do investment into more brand-led video production.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the places we always recommend with clients is start small also in terms of the people you're reaching out to deliver that content. So if you can't afford an app or an internal this or that, think about building out a small advocacy program, internally. So you're reaching out to people across the business, but people who actually probably want to be involved, so they're not being told to do this, they are already ambassadors for your organization, but you're just giving them the tools and the support and maybe a little bit of training, so that they can understand how they can support you in creating that content and delivering stuff that you can then use easily externally. And that, as you said, Chris, that might be in line with this content marketing plan that you've developed. This doesn't need to be a complicated thing, does it? To begin with, it just needs to enable you to know what you're pushing out when, on what channel, and what the topic is. And those topics can come from something like, it could come from the great stats from your employee survey, for instance, or it could come from an underpinned by EVP, but ultimately giving people guidance so that it's just do as a video. It's it's the worst thing you can say. You really want to give them guidance so they're creating the stuff that you need for your content and for you to push out there. I forgot the point I was going to make there ultimately. Charu, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, my kind of builds on that are, I think starting small, absolutely, to what you just said, Noel, and to Chris's point, making sure anything that we're creating hooks back to the larger philosophy. What you don't want to be doing, the larger EVP. Ultimately, we're trying to solve problems here, not do something just because it's a nice thing to do, or we've got the time, or because everyone else is doing. So I think going back to that whole, what's the biggest problem that our TA teams are facing? Is it that we have an unattractive location, therefore what can we be talking about location wise? Is it that we've got a particular requisition, that actually requisitions that are always hard to find, or we have massive retention in that area? that actually means that we should be thinking about different types of individuals from a channel perspective. And I think kind of linking it back to, it's got to create value. What's the purpose of that video? I think there's something around, there's a balance between asking people that are already doing video creation because they're enjoying it, and the diversity piece. You know, when I've often gone out and said, who wants to be part, I'll often get the same types of people putting their hands up, be it kind of the larger extroverts. So I think our role as talent and communications professionals is being really mindful of thinking about diversity and thinking about the different types of people we want to get involved. And to Chris's point, there's some brilliant platforms and resources that are available that I've used, Chris has used, but also sometimes, I've worked in an SME where my guidance has been putting together a Word document and saying, this is how you should hold your phone. These are the type of questions to be answering. And I'm on call. Give me a call if you struggle, because not everyone's natural on the camera, and that's fine, because you don't want, you're looking for Brad Pitt, although, if he's watching, I would be. But it's it doesn't need to be this sort of grandiose sort of support. You've got to create something that's going to make people comfortable and want to be involved. And then just lastly, Noel, to your point, once it's created, making sure that your ambassadors, your leadership, you've got a way of activating it, not just once, not just twice, but 3 or 4 times, so that it's really worth the money and the time you spent in, but also you've got your employees seeing it and going, I want to be part of that, or that leader that wasn't involved because he was too busy or he didn't really get it, saying, I want that for my team next, and reaching out to you proactively.
Yeah, and I think that's a hugely important point here, really, because it's you've got to think about what's in it for them as well, really. Here, haven't you, with any advocacy program? It's not about what they can do for your business. Actually, what is the benefit going to be for these people? Taking their time and thinking and delivering great content for you to use. I'm just keeping us ticking over, going through the questions. You mentioned, ensuring that your EVP and your employer brand are there underpinning those videos. How should that influence things like employee generated content then? Because is there a danger that someone goes off and without that plan and deliver something that's just not going to help you push that consistent message out?
I mean, I think the good thing is, if you've been working on an EVP, it's there already, and actually it's kind of, it sits in the director's chair in terms of, guiding any content that's produced from that. And I think if you have that there, then actually you've got a reference point when it comes to developing things like guidance documentation that Charu mentioned. And I think if people are a bit apprehensive about people being off message, then I think there's that thing about, getting them to share the content with you first as part of a focus project that's maybe helping, the most stressed hiring manager in the business, come up with something which is a, cost-effective video solution to help them hire people and showcase their talented team. So I think it's a confidence thing, is actually, if you do that internally as well, have some sort of control over it first of all, then there's confidence on both sides in terms of the employees getting involved in it, and also you as a kind of a commissioner and leader of that content. So, and then it can be then edited down into something that you feel is safe to do. But then over time, I think I've seen it myself, where you work on projects where you do something, fairly straightforward in terms of content capture by using like online recording software like this, for example, and actually, then 3 months later they're going, oh, I'd love to do a podcast, or actually, we'd love to do something at this site, which is a more of a brand-led video production. So yeah, a long answer, but I'm sure Charu can add to that a bit more. But I think if you've got written documentation in the first place, that's kind of the heart and soul of it, or the North Star, which is a really good starting point.
Charu, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to be careful about demotivating employees. So I have seen where someone's created video off their own bat and comms and everyone's kind of come down on them because it's not been on brand. And ultimately, all that happens then is that they, that they've got much more powerful networks than often HR does or comms does.
Mm.
And it's then when you do need people to support you, you'll get no. So I think there's something around both encouragement, but also I'm very much of a mind that if it's not on message because it doesn't link into your EVP, that's on us. And obviously our EVP hasn't been understood very well, or it needs to be reiterated again and again, and it needs to make much more sense than being an HR dialogue. So I think there's something around, of course, if something's so off brand, completely understand it. I've been in that position as well where I've had to make a call because the CMO's called me. But I think we've got to be really careful that the expectation certainly of people in the job market now is much more around seeing real useful content versus things that just feel like they've been produced because everyone else has done it. So we've got to think about if that employee is creating something that's slightly off brand but is working and they're sharing it off their own bat, that's someone I'd want to be part of the circle of being someone I want to partner with versus going, you can't do that, because he will be a much bigger influencer, I'm sure. And the other thing is, I've done a lot of tech recruitment over the last 3-4 years. The type of content that they want to create, I'm massive, listener to, because it may not make sense to me, and very often it doesn't, but boy, does it work. If you give the guardrails and say, off you go, that content is worth its weight in gold, especially across the ATS piece that Bruce talked to. That is exactly what other tech candidates want. They don't want the big grandiose videos. They want to know about the technology, the development. They want to hear from other individuals doing the roles, talking in a language that makes sense to them, versus why is it a great place to work, and a lot of buzzword bingos because you've given them a script. That just falls flat.
And actually, you're going to, by the fact that they've actually off their own back created their own content is a chance to acknowledge that and go, we'd love you to be part of something. I mean, that is great in terms of endorphins kicking in and going, wow, okay, actually I feel like I'm being appreciated here. And if there are, I mean, this is a whole other conversation, but I don't think we can spend too much time on it. But so what is on brand anyway? If the person that's working for an organization loves what they're doing and is great at what they do, your brand is often just narrowed down to a brand identity, but there's so much more. It's about our actions and how we carry ourselves, and that's what builds rapport between organizations and individuals and other individuals. So yeah, what is on brand is often it's what's in the brand book, but 90% of it is outside of a brand book, really, especially when it comes to what we're talking about.
I think that's very key, and we're talking about video online here, but an employer brand extends way beyond just that medium, and certainly social media and all that other kind of stuff, doesn't it? And understanding if someone's loving what they're doing, then that's going to be great for your brand as well. We are ticking on, Chris. You're right. I quick question really around where have you seen video leveraged really well then to make an impact across that employee life cycle recently? Charu, have you got anywhere where you've seen it really working? You touched on learning and development earlier, but are there any other areas or things you've seen?
Yeah, I've seen some beautiful work. Judged the RADs last year, and the work under the D&I entries were really powerful, and they were largely employee-led, largely unscripted, but obviously hit elements of the business strategy and the EVP that were needed. So one that really resonates and stays in my mind is Capgemini. They have done some beautiful work in the video space for D&I that certainly actually moved me to tears because it was so powerful. And again, I think the secret was very much, it didn't feel like it was a highly overproduced piece of work, and was unscripted, but I've done this enough to know that the amount of work that goes into it, and again, this goes back to, you can't just go create a video. There's so much support we need to give to make sure that people are hitting from a lighting perspective, a scripting perspective. It's not about, these are the answers, but these are the type of points we want you to talk about in your own words. The Capgemini one, really kind of resonated. Another one that, going back a bit, but it actually talks to the influencer thing that we talked about earlier. Nestle did some really cool stuff with influencers a few years ago. I'm talking about 6 or 7 years ago now. I think with Symphony Talent, and they honed in on an influencer that had been talking about Kit Kat on Instagram, and then they invited her to their factory to sort of show how it was made, but then used it as a way to talk about their early careers. And I thought that was really quite advanced, thinking about this individual had a massive audience, but it was twofold, because that video then sat both on the careers page on Instagram, but also the influencer obviously had a massive network. So I think those two kind of really sit well with me.
Yeah. Chris, any things you've seen that really excite you recently?
Yeah, I mean, Amazon, I think Amazon do a lot of great employee generated video, and that is very much, you can tell they've been given a bit of guidance, but literally like walking on the way to the office or going on a run that they wish they'd never signed up to, training for a run they wish they never signed up to, and there it's like super authentic. And so going to say the inside Amazon on YouTube, there's lots of examples there, but I really like what Amazon do in terms of giving their employees a chance to actually use platforms like CNET to actually capture content. There's also another bit which is not quite, kind of in between employee generated and brand led, which is Hogan Lovells in the UK. So a law firm, and actually what they're doing on TikTok in particular, I think is really great, where it doesn't feel like there's a massive film crew going to capture a lot of their content. It feels like there's a bit of prompting in terms of guidance about what they want the employees to talk about, but it's very much like very natural in situ content that is, let's say, co-produced with employees. And I think for me a key thing is actually how you ask the questions. I always remember in my beginning of my agency days wanting to do, we've got a video project and it's like, right, I need to book something in with traffic, and could I have a copywriter? Could I have an interviewer? But we don't have interviewers, we have copywriters. It's like, why don't we have an interviewer? So I think there's a very different skill, copywriting and interviewing. So I think if there are great copywriters who can be great interviewers, but I think when you ask the right question as well, then actually whether it's a remote thing, remotely recorded, or in-person recordings, the kind of questions you ask, which is basically just saying we want to have a chat, I think puts a lot of people, even introverts, at ease, and you get such great content from that. And I've done something recently with a few companies where we've done that, and yes, it's a bit of a extra work when it comes to proofreading captions and making sure those captions are spelt right, because the conversation is less kind of set piece and promo, but it's definitely worth it, because I found when you do that, I even saw it a few weeks ago where one of my clients, one of the people involved, shared a little clip about what they've learned about themselves, and they're saying about being yourself. And that actually ticked the box when it comes to one of the values of the organization, without it being very clearly one of the values of the organization. And last thing, I've got to shout out to DHL and the driver campaign, where mobile phone on the dashboard or some sort of camera on the dashboard, and then singing a song. It's a Bohemian Rhapsody. That's great. And you take that kind of very native, that is native content, you put that and you put paid budget behind it, that's the stuff that flies. TikTok say don't make ads, make TikToks, that's native content. So yeah, that's my little whistle tour of content examples.
Just can I add to that?
Chris,
I think when Chris is talking about all those, what was going through my mind is, all of us on his Teams calls have to keep proving why we're doing this from a budget perspective and analytics. What I'm loving at the moment, which I never had 10 years ago, but now I can, is see how well content's performing in a way that's much more granular, and that kind of that if we're starting small, actually watching the film and going and getting much better results around which part of that short clip, which part of that short film performed better, what was more effective, allows me then to use some brilliant platforms that are really quite cost effective to have a much better generated list of questions via AI that creates again the second video, the third video in a much more richer way. So what I'm loving is the fact that we're saying start small, which hopefully everyone's understood, but again there's a really much nimbler way of going. These two videos I've created, what was more specifically performing well, and how do I then use that intel? and some of the resources that we're going to share actually use that AI piece around then creating the next list of questions for that second or third video, learning from the first one. So you know, I think there's a really way of actually then us justifying that cost piece at speed far more than it was a decade ago.
Yeah, 100% there. I mean, we're big believers in ROI at CA3 on any spend, but I think video especially. And you know, the DHL thing, thanks for the shout out for that, Chris. The knock-on effect of that wasn't just them recruiting, you know, LGV drivers during the driver shortage. It was an increase in retention. Their retention of their own drivers increased by something like 25%, or, you know, got better. So that idea of not only benefiting from a traction perspective, but also from an employee engagement perspective, you know, you've got a reduction in the need to hire people, you know, so you're lowering your costs instantly from that way as well. I'm aware of time, and we do want to get a few Q&As in. So I guess the big question is, a lot of people still feel that video is an expensive thing to do, and we have focused a lot on employee generated content in this chat today, but what can people be doing to sort of maximize production budgets, or reduce budgets, or just be aware, I guess, ultimately that video isn't you know, doesn't need to be super expensive? What sort of tips and advice have you got if they're just thinking about producing?
So
I'll go on, Charu. You go.
So for me, I think it's being really good about joining forces with different functions, so the budget's shared, and that goes back to not just thinking about attraction, but what are the pain points the business is experiencing. So the onboarding development and platform that you do and your team does is brilliant, because you know, our job may be done in TA once the person's accepted the offer and signed their contract, but you know, it could be a 3-month notice period from a leader perspective, or a whole summer if it's a graduate. So I think there's something around joining with communications, with early careers teams, and with learning and development and D&I teams. So I think that allows you to share a budget, but also really thinking about the purpose of the content before you rush to make the video will allow you to think about, okay, which are the different ways I can use it? Can I use it in an internal conference? Can a leader use it when he's going to a sales conference? Can I use it in the different steps of the in-mails that my recruiter team are using, sharing it? Can we use it as part of our onboarding platforms? Can we use it in many, many different ways before you start producing something? I think it's key, because you've got the shared budget, then you've got different functional interested in the output that allows you more advocates, and then largely massive fan, and always have been, around when you're creating something, thinking about many purposes of it, so that you're not just going, this has got to sit in my career site and then I'll have a nod to our social channels. You know, we repurpose
Yeah, and Chris, you are the king of repurposing, I would say. So I'm guessing you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, absolutely, Charu. You know, you're 100% right there. I think the thing about making the most of the opportunity of that content capture is really important, and serialization is massively important. The thing is, though, there's only so much you can serialize a video that is about saying how great you are as an organization. You know, so it actually goes back to the thing about, what is it that we want? What is it that people we want to engage with? What do they want? What kind of value can we add them in terms of helping them take that first or next step in their career? And then when you do that, whether it's and I very strongly suggest, you know, even just people who are starting fresh in video or don't do a lot of video, is use online recording software to actually have conversations with people, to capture those conversations. And make sure you're thinking about something about going, right, if there's a 3-minute video or a 5-minute video, which is a conversation with an employee about this particular thing, is it interesting enough to clip into 30, 60, 90-second pieces? Because if it isn't, then it's probably missing a trick there. Because whether you're doing that, or especially whether you're doing kind of a higher end production, you absolutely need to do more than just the showpiece video and some social cut downs, social clips. You've got to be getting at least 20 videos from a production like that, when you're getting a crew on board, etc., etc. You know, and if it's interesting content, You know, like for example, I did recently something around graduate recruitment, and the content was about helping people get into hospitality rather than just saying, come and work for this hotel. It's fantastic. And actually, we've got so much content that could be clipped up because it was helping people figure out if hospitality is right for them, but also if a fast track career is right for them. Because actually, for all the advertising they might see about joining a fast track program, it may not be for them. It might be too spicy for them. So actually, great, go on and do something else and maybe come back to it later on. So yeah, serialization is really, really important. And there is technology out there that makes serialization easier, but you've got to have that strategy in the first place, that guidance in the first place, and then have the right conversations with people to make sure that then it's easy to find the nuggets, the gold that can be clipped up, which then means you have content that can last months and months rather than just, you know, a few weeks.
Now, I've seen a good example of that with one of our customers at Coventry Building Society. So we see a lot of people will have employee stories and they're very role specific, but they've got a good example where they've clipped up things around, you know, key topics that are relevant across the piece, not to a specific role. So things like D&I, colleague well-being, flexibility, career progression, and these are just as relevant, you know, irrespective of the role. And it's a good way of getting maximum value out of your user-generated content.
Exactly.
Absolutely. The final thing I'll say just before we go to Q&A is, you know, if you are reaching out to a production agency such as CA3, other agencies are available, I think work with them to understand how you can maximize that day. So if you're getting your production crew in for the day, we can work with smaller teams to help reduce budgets. We'll plan far in ahead. So like Charu was saying, it's about understanding what are we going to capture during that day? Who are we going to speak to? Maximizing the amount of footage and people we can speak to across the business, you know, and maybe 50% of that comes from TA budget. And the other, like you said, Sharon, I think it's a great point. It is we're working to create some learning and development videos. Another thing we often do if we are filming, you know, some employer branded stuff for talent attraction, we'll add in some questions around top tips for someone starting their career in this business or people starting in that company, things that can be used at other stages in that employee life cycle and benefit the person that's going through that process at that point. I think it's really, really key. I think the big thing to take away from this, though, is that for me is video doesn't have to be expensive. It really doesn't. So, you know, with careful planning and the right partners, you can deliver something fantastic at a nice low cost. Shall we jump onto Q&A? I know we've got a hard stop in at 7 minutes, so wondered who's got some questions for us. If someone didn't ask at the start, Bruce, am I managing this Q&A or is someone else coming back online to help? Oh, you're on mute, Bruce. Sorry.
Rookie error. Sorry about that. Yeah, Q&A is open. So if anyone has any specific questions for the panel, please feel free to post them either in the chat or in the Q&A tool within Teams.
Should have probably done that bit of housekeeping at the start, shouldn't we?
Probably should have.
Just waiting.
Kate's made a good point about Waitrose, and yeah, it's I think I really like clever videos that the ones that where you can't tell if they're employer led or corporate led, and Waitrose on TikTok is a great example. Waitrose, yeah, they do lots of great content on TikTok.
I've been asked if we can share any links to any platforms that are good for creating content in-house. Have you got any good examples that you could recommend?
Absolutely can. I think after this we are going to be sharing a bit of a resource document, aren't we?
Yeah.
With a few links from some of the bits and pieces we've shared. I mean, one of the ones we use in house, it's not particularly a video one, but it is Canva, you know, which has seen a big rise over the last few years. It's a really easy way to create stuff, certainly for social media. It's really easy to you add your video, you can make stuff move and dance and jump, and it's a pretty easy platform to use, I think. Chris, I think you mentioned
Riverside FM is Riverside.fm is good. If you're wanting, especially if you're wanting to start with by doing remote recorded conversations, it has clipping capability within that as well, and transcriptions for different formats. And there's also simple things like Google Drive. You know, it's having a well-organized filing structure and giving people the opportunity to upload videos, you know, into places like Google Drive. And then there's like places like CNET, obviously, as well. CNET is a great, you know, popular platform in the space, as well as the Martech as well, which is higher end, although they can cater for different budgets, where it's more built into an app where you can share the app with people, and then they can then upload their own video content once they've answered some questions, and then you can edit it as you like when you get it.
I can't actually see the back end. I think there was a question just came up, but I only saw half the point. Who can see the questions being asked?
Yeah, so someone's asked, it's actually from a recruitment agency. So most of the content today has been centered around internal recruitment and careers. Do you think video content should be similar for agencies?
Yes.
Yeah, because we're talking about candidates and employees. So if you're a recruitment agency, you're trying to engage candidates, the right candidates. So absolutely, I don't think anything we've said is irrelevant for you know, thinking about what's the problem you're trying to solve, budgets. And, you know, certainly a lot of agencies out there are competing for, let's say, talent, the right talent. Let's say, you know, it's tech. How do you make sure that your agency stands out? You know, maybe talking about your decision. So yeah, absolutely.
Particularly on like LinkedIn, where you don't want to be, you know, just getting the direct messages from recruiters saying, you know, do you want to have this? Do you want to apply for this job? And you know, you're one of God knows how many people that received it. In terms of raising the profile of recruiters, individual recruiters from agencies on places like LinkedIn, so they are seen as being trusted, you know, sources, is really, really important. And there's loads of candidate advice that recruitment agencies can provide. So that's like I think an absolute kind of open goal for recruitment agencies, is to use their people to actually share that valuable content that's helping candidates maybe be their future clients, and obviously help their you know, their other clients as well.
Definitely.
Is the ideal length for videos these days short or long form, as it seems to always change? Someone's asked.
So we were chatting about this the other day, weren't we? And to be honest, if it's great content, I honestly don't think there's an issue with the length. Wistia, the video marketing platform I mentioned earlier, they did a quick survey of their engagement rates, and up to 1 minute, you've got 50% of people watching to the end. Up to 3 minutes, you've got 48% of people watching to the end. Under 5 minutes, you've got 47% of people watching to the end. It was only after 5 minutes or so when you started to see a drop off, but it wasn't like dropping to 10% or 8%. And I'm always a big believer, if you're telling a great story or that the content is useful, I don't think it matters that much, to be honest. I don't know if anyone else has a view on that.
But it depends on the stage as well, doesn't it? I think because if you got to say an 8-minute video, which is some like top 10 tips of someone to really fly it in the recruitment process, there's a good chance that certainly an engaged candidate is going to be watching all of that video. But also, I think in terms of thinking about the marketing, the attraction side of the funnel, end of the funnel, I think you're absolutely right. Is the length of content will depend on how interesting that content is to the individual. But the reason why I say YouTube have created YouTube Shorts, which is 60 seconds or less videos on the platform, is to try and then encourage people to then consume the longer form content that YouTube is more well known for. So I think it's a mixture of both, and that's why serialization is important, because if you can clip up really great, you know, content that people are interested in, then there's more chance they're going to watch the longer form content. Or they could watch 6 or 7 clips of a filmed podcast episode, but not watch the full thing. But you could argue that actually 80% of the job is done in terms of them getting the value from it and doing the next thing from it.
I think also ask your internal employees. So I think I should have made the point, you know, if it's you're trying to do a video that's trying to solve a problem around, let's say, graduate recruitment, ask those graduates, you know, what would they watch? And I think, you know, some of these myths can be really burst easily by asking our audience and using the data. I think, you know, Chris's point is so valid. If something's 8 minutes long, but it's engaging and interesting, and I'm going for an assessment, and therefore at that stage where I will invest that time, then do it. You know, 8 minutes is fine, but I think if it's early on, then it can be shorter. But again, the best video I've ever created was actually asking a lot of graduates internally, doing, you know, almost a month and a half's worth of research around what they wish they'd known before they joined the program, the organization I worked at, and then did a series of videos answering all those things. So the next round of graduates had those things solved already. And those kind of points they were making, I and my team would never have come up with because I didn't live it. So they were short, you know, short and sharp, but much more a series of videos. But I think to your point, Aisha, is asking the people that you are creating the video for, both internally and externally, and then do some testing. So, you know, starting small has been the mantra of today, you know, doing one and seeing, you know, the analytics, you know, where's the drop off, and then showing internally, you know, is this something they would share? Is this something that would engage them? Is this something they would watch? You know, there's nothing more valuable than asking your audience.
Great. Thanks. I think that's time, Bruce, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. We've posted on screen here just a few links so you can join Chris at Content Marketing Pod, Noel at CA3. We mentioned the Candidate Attraction Report. There's a link there where you can download it. We'll be sending out some further information as well, pick up on some of those Q&A with some of those links to tools that you might want to go and investigate. But yeah, just thanks so much. It's been great to have the experts on board with us today to start talking about the use of video in candidate experience. Hope you found it all useful. We have recorded it. We'll be sending out a link to the recording as well for you to review and also share with your colleagues. So once again, thank you very much, guys, and thanks for everyone for joining us today.